Hello everybody, welcome to this video. It's another in the Student Exemplar series. Today looking at a student exemplar for AQA English Language, Paper 2, Question 5. And this question was, write a letter to your local newspaper in which you argue for or against festivals. Now, I just want to say that there's a lot about this question that is very similar to Paper 1, Question 5. Not in the content of your writing, but in the fact that 16 marks are awarded for spelling, punctuation and grammar. Technical accuracy. And what we've got with technical accuracy is basically two different sides to the coin, as it were. The first side is that the spelling, punctuation and grammar that you use is correct, so avoiding mistakes. The second side of it, and this is the area the higher marks can be achieved in, is to have inventive use of technical features, so inventive use of spelling, punctuation and grammar. One of the things I love to do when I look at a piece of work is just to look over it and to look at the paragraph length. Now clearly the paragraphs in this are of a very similar length, apart from right at the beginning here where there's a single sentence paragraph for emphasis, and that's great. But you know from watching my videos, and make sure you're watching the AQA English Language playlist, that we have this word in the higher part of the mark scheme about being compelling. And compelling is about grabbing your attention at the beginning and making you want to carry on reading. And so often what students do with things like sentence length and paragraph length is make a lot of effort at the beginning, as we see here, but perhaps let it slip a little bit as the piece goes on. So the first piece of advice, just from looking at this piece of work, is to vary paragraph length throughout the piece, and that will help to keep the reader engaged. So let's have a look. Dear the Echo, have you ever witnessed the chaos caused by festivals and fairs? I believe that we should ban festivals and fairs, as all they do is cause pollution and noise for local communities. Festivals equal litter. Have you ever stopped to think about how much? 7 tons. So just to break down these opening lines here, the paragraph length is short and snappy. The single sentence paragraph here is very dramatic for effect, that's great. We've got some of the arrested devices in the rhetorical question and the alliteration, and another rhetorical question and some statistics. And if you're trying to be persuasive, statistics, and we see them throughout here, we've got a 75,000 statistic there. I think there was one later. But statistics help you to be persuasive. Persuasion is all about this clever mix of fact and opinion. And facts can come in numerical facts as statistics, and you will make the statistics up, okay? So as long as they kind of make sense, you make them up. But this student is using all of those kind of arrested devices, as well as deliberately varying sentence and paragraph length in the opening, and that's fantastic. 7 tons of litter is produced every year due to festivals and fairs such as Glastonbury. Who picks up this litter? Now, this is a comma where it shouldn't be. This is a comma splice. We never use commas to divide complete sentences. They're used to divide the clauses in complex sentences and compound sentences. They're used to divide items in a list. They're used for bracketing commas. And you can see all of that in my grammar playlist and look at the videos on commas. But what they're not used for is to divide complete sentences. And this is a complete sentence on either side of the comma. This perhaps would be better as a colon. I can guarantee that it is not the person who dropped it on the ground in the first place. Councils have to pay millions of pounds each year to pick up after the festival goers who are too lazy to find a bin. So some nice emotive language here in lazy. It is estimated that the V Festival in Chelmsford caused 75,000 nitrous oxide canisters to be dropped onto the festival field last year. So not only is the field covered in rubbish, much of it is left over from illegal substances. Do you think it is fair for Chelmsford City Council to have to clean up after the thousands who travel to the field to listen to overrated, loud American music? Now what I would say here, and I see this a lot in students' work, is perhaps an overuse of the rhetorical question. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 by this point. And I think that the writing questions for paper 1 and paper 2 are sufficiently short questions that you should really never demonstrate any particular skill more than perhaps twice. So that goes for, rhetorical questions, but also maybe statistics, semicolons, single sentence paragraphs for effect. a couple of times is really important. You don't want to wait until the latter part of your answer to start being inventive with those kind of things, because the examiner will have formed an impression about the quality of your writing by then. So it's probably that you want to use those sorts of things, perhaps a sentence that starts with two adjectives or an adverb, that kind of thing. You want to use them within the first couple of paragraphs and then perhaps again at the last couple of paragraphs. So I think the rhetorical question is perhaps being a little bit overdone here. The other thing is, if you're ever trying to be persuasive, and I go through this in my English language ebook, I know I hardly ever mention it, but I do have a revision guide, paperback on Amazon, ebook at mrbruff.com, Kindle edition on Amazon. And I talk about the best way to win any argument is to anticipate your reader's response and to argue against it. So if you're writing to say that festivals are bad and you're writing to a local newspaper, you want to spend some time anticipating why is it that the local newspaper might believe festivals are good in the local area. So you then begin to address their concerns. You say, you know, you might feel, and you can see that, of course, the student here is starting to address these, but you say things like, you might think that they bring, you know, or boost local economy, however. You might feel that they make the lives of residents more light-hearted and enjoyable, however. So as well as presenting all of your concerns, which we've got here, you want to anticipate how your reader is going to feel about this subject and address those concerns as well. I do, however, this is a bracket in commas, I was talking about the correct use of commas, two commas together and the bit in between the two commas can be taken out and it still makes sense on its own, so it would say, I do understand, so that's good. I do, however, understand that festivals and fairs have some benefits, particularly in the field of education. No pun intended, I would have written there. For example, the Big Bang Fair in Birmingham is a 3-day festival that engages thousands of children in STEM subjects, and banning festivals would destroy events like this despite having positive impacts. This means that the next generation will have to suffer as a result of some inconsiderate people who are simply too lazy to properly dispose of their litter they cause. Now this is interesting because the student is here suggesting, look, you know, we should ban these festivals. Here seems to be second-guessing and anticipating the reader's response, but then doesn't address that. So what needs to be added here is you might think that some festivals are good, however. And actually what the student is doing is addressing the reader's concerns or potential concerns, but not arguing against them. As a result of living in Essex, so the student here has just moved on to another idea, I frequently have to travel on the M25 in order to navigate around the country. Last year I was unfortunately forced to travel on this motorway with 50,000 other people who were travelling to Chelmsford to see some D-list band perform 2 or 3 songs in order to promote their inevitable comeback album. Imagine if this was you, having your holiday ruined before you've even reached Heathrow's Terminal 5. What I like here is the emergence of some emotive vocabulary. So we've got unfortunately, and I love the inevitable, the sort of sarcasm, there's a tone coming through. And this is interesting because paper 1 question 5, students tend to get so heavily invested in the emotive language and really kind of being creative. Paper 2 question 5 seems to stifle that in a lot of students. And we're seeing the beginnings of it here, but it would be great to have some emotive vocabulary choices and some really kind of personal side to this. You know, a little bit of sarcasm, a little bit of humour, all of that kind of thing can be really useful. And we're starting to see little touches of it that clearly the student has, but it's kept in this kind of formal tone, which, although you could argue is appropriate, becomes again not so compelling. Fortunately, so there's a nice bit of sentence variety, starting a sentence with an adverb. I do not live in a town where these idiotic festivals take place. However, how would you feel if you were kept awake all night by some intoxicated hippies murmuring along to last year's number 40 on the Billboard chart? Anyone with some sense, unlike the festival attendees, would see this behaviour as being a million miles away from acceptable, so why do we have to put up with it? And that's again finishing with a question. So there are some strengths to this piece, but I think for your paper 2 question 5, I really suggest that you start off by thinking, what am I trying to persuade my reader about? And it might not be a persuade question, it might be an argue, it might be something else, but what opinion am I trying to get across? And what is my reader likely to think about this? I go through this in my English language playlist, so make sure you watch the entire playlist. But the point is, you have a specific audience you're writing for, and they're the most important thing. You need to think about who they are, and who they are will inform your vocabulary and tone, register as the exam board call it, but you also want to think about what are they likely to think about the topic I'm going to write about, and how can I take what they think and address it because I want to persuade them of my point of view. So lots of positives in this piece and some targets for improvement. I hope you found it useful. Please do subscribe to the channel.